maybe you could just share with me, because I'm always curious about this. How did you get to Blackstone Partners, and how did you decide to get into managing your own funds in the IRA? And
Sure. Well, so we basically have to revert back to our walkie-talkie days, and we can't talk over each other. Is that it?
there you go. Breaker, one.
Yeah, cool. Well, so not terribly long ago, for a number of years now, I've been with Charles Schwab has had my IRA, some of that, and then we also had another option through the firm that I work for at New England Financial, and they were doing so-so along the way and stuff, and I was with their managed group, so pretty much gave them the good old generalization of I have X number of years until I plan to use any of it, and so they put me in whatever their structured portfolio was for that particular request. And so I'm 58, moving on 59 now, and determined, well, maybe there are some other alternatives, whether that be cryptocurrency or real estate. Certainly was one of the main ideas we had of becoming more involved directly in some physical assets, even maybe some precious metals and things like that weren't as easily or accessible and viable under those other plans. And so that's where I started kind of looking around and researching. And to be honest, I couldn't even tell you at this point how I came across the idea or the option of the checkbook IRA, checkbook self-directed IRA. But somewhere along the line, I came across that term and I started investigating. I think the first one I came across was literally checkbook IRA, which according to their marketing info, they were kind of the originators of that idea maybe. But we checked out a few of those, and to be honest, just found the folks at Checkbook IRA, and specifically Peter Rizzo and his ready availability and knowledge and background and information that he provided on a very timely basis, that they seem best suited to work with, or a good team to work with. So we ultimately moved our money over and opened up moved our funds over to the Checkbook IRA company. Here, just a few months ago then, our connection to Blackstone came ultimately through them when I got an email about a webinar regarding, I'm not sure exactly how it was presented. I think it may have been about the Panama Canal emerging market, and looked through there and ultimately saw it was Blackstone. So I attended the webinar, and I think through there requested a follow-up discussion, and that's how I connected up with Tim and you guys there ultimately. And so we had a number of conversations about what you guys do, and it seemed to align with, and talking with my wife and I, obviously one of the questions and concerns is how much time do I have to learn this kind of thing, understand what options there are in real estate, and the thought of doing something either locally or teaming up with, whether it be Blackstone or any number of, I'm sure you're well aware, there's all kinds of options and opportunities to put your money into something, teaming up with somebody who wants to use your money to invest in real estate and other opportunities. So through that discussion and vetting you guys, Blackstone and Tim and the team there and all, and of course with Tim's persistence, we finally came to where we decided that it looked like a very viable and good opportunity to where you guys take care of most of the research and development and have the team there to handle the transactions necessary and take care of the properties. And so I'm not restricted to doing something here in the Kansas City area, but something that hopefully has a great, not necessarily long term. I mean, we're talking, I guess, 3 to 5 years is kind of the potential out that we're looking at, even in the Lancaster, Pennsylvania area that we're in. So all of that looked very appealing, and getting to know Tim and stuff, it seemed like a good connection to make it where I'm only kind of self-directing and having to manage all of that, teaming up with somebody who has the knowledge and expertise to make my money work a little better than I was in those areas of just the market, ultimately.
Yeah. So maybe you can tell me a little bit, because there's a lot of different decision-making processes, but maybe you can share with me what your financial background was. You gave me some history of who you were entrusting to do some financial modeling for you early on, but what is your process? What is your background, and how were you able to either feel comfortable or continue to do research to make sure that you did get to this place of feeling comfortable about investing with Beckstone Partners?
Certainly. Well, my background, I graduated from college with a degree in accounting, I'll say have my CPA certificate, so I was a certified public accountant for a while before going into other areas. I worked at a small private college and other not-for-profit organizations along the way until literally about 20 years ago, I came across an opportunity and started working with the consulting firm that I'm at now called Kerr Consulting, and we basically sell and support accounting, HR, inventory management, payroll software there. So that's what I've done for the past basically 20 years. So I have a lot of hands or basically background and information about business and finance in general through that. So from there, it was, as I mentioned, kind of in the process of looking at what Charles Schwab and New England Financial were doing, and ultimately, kind of this time frame, how do I describe it? I don't know that I guess I want to believe that Trump is making America great again. I just have significant concerns about $22 trillion worth of deficit in our country, and the fact that next year they voted in that we're going to have probably another trillion added to that. I personally don't foresee that can go on for an indefinite period of time. So I think that ultimately has to affect the markets. At the same time, the banking system, our treasury system has artificially held rates extreme, at, as we know, historic lows for an incredibly extended period of time just to keep things from breaking apart. But in my opinion, we're either going to control the way it's going to break apart, or we're going to have it thrust upon us. It's kind of my perspective there. And so that being the case, I was not terribly comfortable having, or at least a significant part of my retirement. That's not all of my IRA money isn't the extent of our retirement. It's really probably just one component of that. But ultimately, the fact that it was pretty much all dominated in the market, well, it's either in market or they have it in cash doing nothing, and that wasn't terribly appealing, the options I had there. So that's what basically spurred me to, or prompted me to go looking at other avenues and alternatives. And so, as I described, I think between, and I'm not a big gold pretender, albeit I think probably everybody's portfolio needs some of that in there. My son, he's kind of I'll call him my cryptocurrency connection. He does a ton of, he's researching it all the time and giving me his ideas from his experts and all that he's talking about. But I think it ultimately has validity, and where our world's heading. I don't know that that's ultimately going to take over as the world currency. Along that same line, I think the U.S. dollar's prominence in that arena is somewhat tenuous. I don't know how long that can continue on in its current circumstance. So I think that's another alternative that we've been doing some dabbling in a bit and all. And then of course real estate, regardless of what all the other markets do, the real estate's still going to be there. That the buildings and all, people still need places to live and such. So I basically wanted an alternative that would allow us access to move in those areas. And so, as I mentioned, the connection with Beckstone came through the Checkbook IRA webinar that they had. And so from there, it was literally looking at the numbers and the facts and the paper. And so from there, as Tim will tell you, the accountant in me comes out when we're talking about numbers and getting to closing and what that's going to entail. And so from that, in reviewing the numbers and the cost and the, just the general potential for returns there, really aligned with what we were looking at doing more, I'll call it on an independent basis, but having you guys there as an expert and analysis and managing the process just made that an appealing option.
One of the things, Randy, whenever I hear anybody say they used to have a CPA license or they used to be an accountant, I refer to them as recovering accountants. Well, I tell everybody I moved into what I do after being a controller and manager for several years. I kind of said at the time, some 20 years ago, at that point, if I can make the same amount of money and not have to manage employees, that would probably be worth it right there. Of course, now I get to manage clients, which sometimes can be almost as bad, but not in general. And at least there, in my job, I'm dealing with who knows how many different clients a day. So at least I have variety in that respect. So that's kind of one of the reasons that pushed me out. And I got tired of now when a client says, "Hey, I'm having trouble with this bank reconciliation, and can you help me with that?" I'll say there too, I got tired of digging for that 3 cents that I was off, and so I don't do accounting anymore, and I rarely tell anybody that I used to be a CPA, because of course then they throw out their tax questions to you, and I barely do my own tax, much less want to do anybody else's. So I try and keep that somewhat under wraps and at this point in time. So after your analysis, your thinking, and you've really taken control of your life with the self-directed IRA and that type of thing, yet you still have to act, you still have to pull the trigger and have the courage to do so. So what are the one or two things that really at the end of the day were the things that really brought you that confidence, the courage to pull the trigger and execute on putting real estate into your self-directed IRA?
Sure. Fellas, before I go down that road completely, I'll just say that there have been so just making the change from being in regular employee of a regular company along the way 20 years ago, I was at a crossroads there. Do I want to jump out of this pretty safe and secure? It wasn't a bad job or anything, nothing I really disliked, but was I interested in jumping out of that and taking a chance on basically going into a consulting firm where I was more or less going to be my own boss, self-employed, and as I tell people, if I don't work, I don't get paid. So I'm used to that, and so I took a chance of that 20 years ago, and it paid off. Approximately 10 years ago was another opportunity. I, through a connection, basically a friend of a friend, or actually a friend of my client, made a connection with me of this other individual, and we started doing some I'll say, work with, investing, being an associate of his in some venture capital opportunities. And so we're used to kind of that, or used to risk, I guess, in general, of being able to kind of assess what that risk, reward, return, ROI on that risk is. And so 10 years ago, we started working with this individual, and just as, to be honest, that's where a significant part of our portfolio lands today, and we make a significant return on that investment, or have over the past 10 years. So just from those two kind of opportunities, we have found that just from doing our ability to search and vet partners or people that we're going to work with has turned out to be beneficial, and our sense of where we're heading with things has worked out quite well for us. So that being said, when we got to looking at Vexstone, it literally was kind of looking at the past history of things they have done and the information that Tim was able to provide that basically, I'll say, proved the idea of how it works with the emerging markets, and how your team has configured it to, between the management fee looks to be, like in effect, I'm paying you guys 8 for Vexstone 8% to more or less manage my properties, and that money for me. That's not terribly significantly more than I was paying Charles Schwab or New England Financial for what they were doing for me. And so that trade-off was pretty easy to determine that, all right, I ultimately, from our conversations with the folks there at Vexstone, I was able to bring my comfort level from the documentation shown, the past history of emerging markets and how those things changed the real estate market around them, and felt comfortable that, all right, again, this is a 3 to 5 year span that we're looking at, and so it was worth the trade-off of the potential, shortfalls or maybe a real estate lag or something. It's still going to be rented and covers there. So just the general idea of how rental property works, that if you can't sell it, you can still rent it, and so you're not going to the likelihood of losing your shorts like you might in the market, in a market drop. And the fact that I'm in, we're talking at this point, the project is in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, not in Southern California or something where the markets, do have a much more potential for a significant drop. Obviously, you have a little more upward potential possibly, but you really don't have that same huge potential for the drop that you have in some areas like Southern California or Phoenix and those kind of high-end real estate markets. So it was really just through all of those various experiences and our conversations with Tim and others there that brought our confidence level to a sufficient point where we were ready to move forward with them.
Yeah, you've got some really, really great experience in understanding that 8% of a cash flow is like 1% of the market value.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
You have a lot of great experience, and so there are many people that are really having some of the same concerns that you have with the economy, and they're sitting on the sideline and they're wondering about real estate, but they've never had that experience in the past. If a friend of yours is getting ready to cash his last paycheck and go into retirement, and they asked you, like, just for a quick, why would real estate make sense, for somebody who's getting ready to live off of their cash flow, how would you articulate something to somebody to encourage them to diversify and to potentially consider real estate?
Well, it would vary a bit from somebody, as you're describing, is cashing their last paycheck and therefore going into a retirement situation where they may not be putting money in an IRA any longer. They're actually, that's their, bottom line is there are tax ramifications of that are slightly different than what I'm doing and we do together in my checkbook IRA. So that's, makes it slightly different, but only slightly. But the bottom line is that, with real estate, as I described, you have the option to either turn that over on a regular basis with, people, and hey, I have to admit, I'm an HGTV addict, and all those shows of flipping houses and stuff is intriguing. And we have done that. Ultimately, my wife and I, we've done that personally and all, and come to the conclusion that it's a good hobby for us. It is not something that we want to do. We'd have to do, make what we want to make and all. We'd have to do at least probably 10 a year or something, and we really don't have the time, effort, or energy to do that many. To do something, say with Beckstone like we're doing, where we're really a totally passive opportunity there, but still in the same market and getting the same or better benefits from that, is the fact for them that one, diversification. Two, I've heard it many times that people talk about, man, I just wish I had never sold that place. I should have hung on to it. Now it's worth $1 billion, whatever it is. You hear that way more often than you hear people say, I got out of there just in time. But with real estate, as I was describing, if the market isn't where you want to sell it, then you can hang on to it and make it a rental. These days, the rental market is as hot or hotter than the just selling market these days. Rents are, I'll just say, exorbitant, as people describe and all. It's hard to find places at a reasonable rate, so you can readily, cash flow a decent property, maybe not so decent. I wouldn't want to work with some of the I've got a friend, for instance, from church. He owns, I don't even know how many, 50, 60, 70 HUD type homes. So obviously there's a benefit there that you've got some government subsidies, so you're not necessarily going to be out as much rent if somebody skates, but you're dealing with a different clientele. So that's probably not something that I would recommend, or certainly isn't for me. But bottom line is that you've got somebody paying for the mortgage, plus these days you should easily cash flow a decent property in a normal circumstance if you have done your research and investigated any reasonable manner of finding the right properties to do that with. And then you've got appreciation. In general, there have been really very few time frames of any length that real estate has tanked it for an extended period of time. But even through those, if you're already renting it, then you've got that covered, and your cash flow, again, these days should be pretty easy to be positive and on your side. So you really have the positive outlook of both sides of that you can work from.
Yeah. Well, protecting the downside, if inflation comes back, is important, but protecting it with the cash flow that if it's not marketable, that you can continue to get the rent to make the payments is something that a lot of people don't realize with the real estate. But then you have the upside of appreciation. So I'm curious if anybody that if somebody were to ask you, why real estate, why Beckstone Properties, and you only had a minute to give an answer to what you've appreciated about the experience, how would you articulate that?
Well, first of all, real estate is just a hot topic. You don't have to look far to find any number of organizations pushing the idea of getting into real estate. So you can easily get the knowledge and expertise, or just not necessarily expertise, but knowledge to say that real estate is certainly one of the options you should be considering as part of your portfolio. With respect to Beckstone Partners, I just have them look at the whole package. They basically do all the background, all the research, put a package together, and basically can just come to you and show you the numbers. And as I mentioned, you can make similar returns to somebody who's trying to do it on their own, but you're in effect, a totally passive situation where you just have to come up with some of the dollars as the down payment, and you can be in the real estate market for a relatively small amount of initial input of funds, and come and be working with somebody who has a great amount of expertise in that particular realm, in that particular market, that again, I don't have the time to come up to speed with that. And so I'm willing to pay, and not even necessarily a significant premium to make that happen. Especially, one thing we didn't really mention was I've looked into the non-recourse lending. And just the fact that we have a rate of 5% that we're using there is below market. So that's one place that I didn't mention, that, in effect, it's offsetting some of that 8% that I'm paying you guys by the fact that I would probably be paying 6, 7, or 8% on a non-recourse loan to be able to do that myself.
Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you for bringing that up. Really appreciate you taking the time. Just one last question. If there was one thing that Beckstone could do to make it a better experience, maybe improve education, or just anything that comes top to mind, what would be one thing that you could advise them on to make it a better experience for you?
Let's see. Trying to think through the process of, we just really had some small, I'll say, bumps in the road of some of the numbers. As I said, me being an accountant, that I came across that I said, wait, Tim, this we were thinking a little bit different on this, and making sure that all of those were in line, and even in some of the initial, I'll say, marketing materials and all, it was hard for me to follow. But there were two offerings basically, and I was having a struggle, Tim having to clarify, okay, no, this one was really for that particular property, and this other one related to that. And so that was really about the extent of some of the, like I said, bumps that are just hurdles that weren't really hurdles, more or less speed bumps, that I just had to get additional clarification that maybe if the initial brochures and things were set up a little bit differently, they might not have created that confusion. But ultimately, it's really trying to help people. The Panama, so for instance, I don't know that Panama Canal is a prime example. Sorry for my office phone going off there. But
I apologize. You're doing this, and we really appreciate your time.
Gotcha. Okay.
So the Panama.
I was just going to say that I'm not sure that the Panama Canal thing, how that might be, the fact that it's just foreign and, somewhere down south there, whether that is the best emerging market example to use for you guys and all, how that relates to the average guy like me here, in middle America and stuff, whether that is maybe the most useful example or not. I know maybe it's just such a huge project and all, but does that really relate to somebody here in America saying, well, I don't, makes me a little nervous thinking of going to South America or Central America there or something. You might want to consider, if you've got something maybe a little more, just in the continental United States that might be something that might connect more and not seem so foreign, then, so to speak.
Yeah, that's good advice, and really just sometimes with the supply and demand of warehousing and access to people, but it's really about supply and demand, protecting your downside in real estate. So,
exactly.
But that finding more relevant things, we're trying to stack a few of those to help people understand that your downside is being protected. But
right.
Randy, I appreciate you taking the time